Farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Thanks everybody for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Shaun Haney here with RealAgriculture.com. It is great to be with you here on this Monday. It's a big Monday. Fall economic statement. Maybe the battle or a bit of the hard feelings between the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland were maybe a little understated on Friday. Maybe a little bit. He apparently pulls her aside on Friday in some sort of meeting and indicates that he no longer wants her to be the finance minister. He's been pushing for Mark Carney, trying to convince him, former head of the Bank of Canada, head of the Bank of England, obviously a very experienced person in the area of finance. And she refuses the position and Monday morning says, you know what? Take it. You can shove this letter somewhere. And she resigns. And so now she's a backbencher. Government scrambling at the time of recording the show here. We don't know who is going to be providing the fall economic statement, but we're going to have lots of drama today. We've got Pete Johnson here on Agronomic Monday. Pete's going to be here to talk about a number of different agronomic issues. We've also got Lyndsey Smith here as well today. We are going to promote the Agronomists and that great live streaming show we do every Monday night. Tonight is all about pulse production, and she's going to give us a bit of some insight into what's coming up in the future weeks over the holiday break and into January. But we're also going to talk about what's going on in Ottawa. She lives there. And let me tell you that paralysis has infected the downtown of Ottawa. I don't know how we don't have an election now. We've got Francis Drouin, who is the parliamentary secretary for agriculture, him calling for the prime minister. It's the gig's up, time's up. And we're going to see a whole bunch of backbenchers now stepping up and calling for the resignation of the prime minister. So we'll talk about that at the back end of today's program. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we got Pete Johnson right after this.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
happens here.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Looking forward to the discussion today with Pete Johnson. But first, I want to tell you about Genesis Fertilizers. Farmers' trust is everything. Genesis Fertilizers is making real progress toward providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more by going to genesisfertilizers.com/credibility. I know Genesis has been out and about across Western Canada trying to talk to farmers about their strategic plan, the business plan, the why of having a farmer-owned fertilizer manufacturing facility would be of huge benefit, and how you can be a part of that ownership group. So if you want to find out more, like I said, go to genesisfertilizers.com/credibility. Bringing him in, it is Peter Wee Pete Johnson. Pete, how are we doing on this fine Monday? We're getting closer to Christmas, and I wonder if you've actually started your shopping.
Well, define started your shopping, Shaun. So yes, Sheila has managed to, get some things shipped to our family in the UK, right? So Amazon is a great tool from that perspective. There's Amazon in the UK, or there's so the answer to that is yes. But if you're asking, has Pete done any Christmas shopping? Yeah, dream on, baby. Okay. Not yet.
You sound like you've done the delegation that I've done. That's... We sound like we're on the same path there, my friend.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm not judging. I'm just,
No.
We sound the same.
Yeah, and I'm not sure delegation is the right term. I think that that I am just fortunate that I don't have to do that.
Yeah,
and I appreciate greatly that it gets done.
Okay, hey, fair enough. Hey, last week we were talking about sulfur. Okay. And we got an email from Emily, who's located in Southwest Manitoba. And she said, "Hey, Shaun, listening to your sulfur conversation with Pete yesterday, I was curious about what his thoughts would be on fall-applied Tiger 85, which is elemental sulfur. We have had massive issues with AMS in the drills here lately, so most farms have switched to a fall-applied sulfur program using elemental. It appears to be working from tissue tests we have taken and monitoring levels, but very hard to track sulfur in the soil test. Any thoughts would be appreciated." So, Emily, thanks so much for your email there. Pete, what say you?
Yeah, so first off, Emily's 100% right. Sulfur soil tests are really, I don't know. Dave Franzen out of North Dakota State has said there is no sulfur soil test that works. And so trying to use that as a gauge gets tough. You can use a sulfur soil test to say there's absolutely enough sulfur, but when you cross that threshold, you really get into a gray zone of, man, is there enough there? Isn't there enough there? How the heck would we know? And so that Emily's right on from that perspective. And her other comment I find really interesting, that the dry ammonium sulfate in the cedar has caused all sorts of issues. So dry ammonium sulfate is terrible for sucking moisture out of the air. If you're drilling, or if you're in Ontario in a corn planter situation, you're planting and you're using dry fertilizer as a starter and AMS is in that, it will suck moisture like crazy. I had a little bit left over out of my corn planter. I put it in one of those jute bags, if you will, like plastic. It's not jute anymore, but man, it sucked up so much moisture that it ran water on the floor just out of one bag of fertilizer. So yeah, so if you're going to use it, you have to use an absorbent. Whether it's kitty litter or there's I think Ag Absorb or something like that you can add into your dry fertilizer blend so that doesn't happen. So I feel Emily's pain on that one, and I understand why you would go to elemental sulfur. But to answer her question, it really comes down to, Shaun, what crop are you growing?
Okay.
Because you put elemental sulfur on in the fall, well, it has to transfer or has to go through a biological transformation from elemental sulfur to sulfate. The plant cannot take up elemental sulfur. It has to change to sulfate. And that's a biological process. Well, if I put elemental sulfur on in Southwest Manitoba in November, there ain't no biological activity happening, man. Like, it is cold. You get over it. And so then if I plant, or if I put it on alfalfa or winter wheat, a crop that has a really early demand, there's just no way that it's going to transfer or transform fast enough to meet the early sulfur demand of that crop. But if I grow spring wheat or I grow canola or a spring seeded crop where that sulfur demand doesn't really happen till probably the 1st of June, or maybe even not till the 15th of June, then guess what? I've got lots of time for that elemental sulfur to change form, to go through that biological process and have enough sulfate sulfur available for the crop to meet the demand. So it's not as simple an answer as no, that'll never work, or yes, that'll always work. I'm being an agronomist, right, Shaun? It depends, but it really does depend on what crop you're growing and on when that demand happens, whether or not elemental sulfur in the fall will satisfy your crop sulfur needs or not. So Emily did respond to me because I sent her that in an email, and she said she's predominantly spring seeded cereals and canola. So in that situation, the elemental sulfur in the fall is probably going to meet her demand. If she was growing winter wheat in Ontario, it simply would not.
And is monitoring success through tissue samples the adequate way to do that?
So absolutely, tissue samples are a great way to monitor, but remember that the amount of sulfur in the tissue, the critical level, really changes by growth stage. And so wheat is my example. When we first ran into sulfur deficiency in wheat about 2010, went to the field, yellow patches in the field, sampled those yellow patches. The critical value was supposed to be 0.2. They were at 0.22. And you said, well, it seems like they're fine. But I also sampled the dark green areas of the field that were not showing any deficiency. And lo and behold, they were at 0.3. And so the problem with that critical value is for flag leaf wheat. So wheat is at the flag leaf or boot stage. You take that top leaf, the flag leaf, you analyze it. And at that stage in the wheat crop, the critical value is 0.2. But earlier in the going, what we learned through our trials is that if I'm at 5-leaf wheat, or if I'm at, first node, growth stage 31, if I'm at that stage, then the critical value is at least 0.25, maybe even 0.28 or 0.3 to not be sulfur deficient. Mm. So when you say, is tissue sampling a good way? 100%. But you have to match that value to the growth stage of the crop. And this is true in wheat, it's true in corn, it's true in soybeans. So that one value that you see as the critical value might not be the value you need. With soybeans, they often look at the nitrogen to sulfur ratio. So it's a great test, but know how to interpret it.
If we think about sulfur overall, and of course, how we use sulfur, and geography is playing a big role here, okay? But, and like you said, what crop we're talking about as well. In generalities, is there a common thread of misunderstanding we have about sulfur, or I don't want to say mistake, but just like one of those things where it's like we think one thing, but actually the reality is there's some facts that tell us otherwise?
So I think the one common thread maybe is that when we put it on doesn't matter, and that all crops need sulfur. So, all crops need sulfur fertilization. And so that work we talked about last week, where if I plant soybeans ultra early, I get a benefit out of sulfur, but it's not so much the benefit that the crop needs the sulfur, it's that the rhizobia, the nodulation, needs that sulfur early. And then if I don't plant soybeans early, I don't get any benefit out of applied sulfur at all. Full stop. Again, that's on soybeans. The reason I don't get a benefit is because soybeans, the plant itself, it needs its sulfur in August. By the time August comes, man, there is tons of sulfur that has become available from the soil. So I don't need to apply sulfur on soybeans unless I plant ultra early. And it's really not for the soybean. It's so that the rhizobium will nodulate with the soybean. So is there a common misunderstanding? Yeah. And part of this, Shaun, is because in the 90s, most areas, not all. If you go to, Alberta, not so much. But once you
around the Rust Belt, the manufacturing belts, like acid rain, right?
Oh, yeah. So sulfur deposition, not just acid rain, but dry deposition. Man, in the 90s, Ontario was getting 30 pounds per acre per year of sulfur out of the atmosphere, whether it was an acid rain or dry deposition, but it just came. And even Western Canada was getting more because globally there was more sulfur being released out of coal fired electricity plants, out of diesel. We've taken the sulfur out of the diesel. We're not using so much coal. So globally, there is less sulfur that comes out of the atmosphere. Today in Ontario, I haven't seen the latest data, but we're probably about 4 pounds instead of 30 pounds.
Significantly less.
In 20 or 30 years, right? So I did sulfur research 3 times in my career. The first 2 times we found nothing and nothing. And then the third time we found out that, oh my gosh, this is a really important nutrient because it's no longer coming for free.
Yeah. Hey, Pete, we're going to take a break. We've got more coming up here on Agronomic Monday. I got lots of questions for you. We'll see if you have answers when we come back. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. It's Agronomic Monday here on RealAg Radio. Shaun Haney, your host, joined by Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Hey, save big on your canola seed for next season. Who doesn't love to save big? Up to $40 per bag, big. Pete, $40 per bag. And here's pay attention here. You need to act fast. Save on the highest yielding DeKalb canola hybrid, DK401 TL. Visit your local seed retailer or DeKalbRewards.ca. Okay, Pete, I mentioned that I have questions, and you said, well, during the commercial break, you mentioned you may not have answers, but you at least have, I have questions, you have opinion. That's best way.
Yeah, exactly. I have opinions, and hopefully I have some answers. But if I don't have the answer for sure, I still will have an opinion.
Yeah, so you and I were, over the weekend, because we're like that. We're sharing links back and forth. And there was one here from Andrew McGuire. And interesting. So he tweeted or X'd, post, I don't know what we call it anymore. The strategy of nature mimicry in crop production is built on flawed assumptions. Okay, that's too high of a level of percent. I'm going to ask you what that actually means. 1, believing cropland can function like wild ecosystems. And 2, assuming natural always means superior. Okay. Pretty profound statements there. Pete, what is he getting at?
Yeah, so there is this concept that we need to move back towards more natural systems, that nature is in perfect harmony and that man has done all bad things. And so this push is always, return to nature. And what Andrew is saying is that is based on incredibly incorrect assumptions. Nature is not always better. If nature was better, then we never would have had to have agriculture. We would have just been hunter-gatherers,
Right.
or we would have been like, come on, people. If you want today's society, unfortunate reality is that we need modern agriculture. And that doesn't mean modern agriculture doesn't come with a whole bunch of concerns, because it does, Shaun. And we talk about lots of those. But what Andrew really says, if you read the article, is that the public always wants to focus on the unintended consequences. That's really the way I like to term it. It's when we do something in agriculture, we do it because it has good outcomes, but like higher yield, feed more people per acre, more protein, more nutritious food. Believe it or not, oftentimes it is more nutritious food. That goes against the grain for a lot of people listening.
Right.
But you get higher protein if you add nitrogen fertilizer, full stop. And higher protein is often more nutritious. It depends. But regardless, this concept that everything we do in agriculture is bad is because all we hear about are those unintended consequences, and we never focus on the good that's actually done. And so I go back to there's an OECD graph that I use at the start of a lot of my presentations, where we have basically since 1960, since modern agriculture started, where we got better genetics, we got pesticides, we got fertilizers over that time frame, so 60 years basically, we have increased production, agricultural production, by almost 400% on only 10% more land. And so for people listening that say we want to save the forests and the grasslands that we haven't already brought into agriculture, well, man, that increase in production is incredibly important to save the rainforest that still exists, because if we don't have that production, we lose that.
Yeah.
But there's this constant thought that nature is better. And what Andrew is saying is that nature isn't better. What we need to do is look at nature,
respect it,
and try things 100%. But look what happens in a natural ecosystem and test them in an agricultural system, which is not a natural ecosystem. Farmers always claim they are the original stewards of the land. And that is only true after we started agriculture. The first time we plowed the grassland in Western Canada, Dwight Eisenhower made a quote that said, the moldboard plow is the equivalent of a hurricane, tornado, tsunami. I can't remember all those things happening to the soil all at once. And it's 100% true. We really do change the ecosystem, and we have to produce food. The other fallacy is that the natural ecosystem would support today's civilization.
Right.
And it doesn't. What happens in a natural Sorry?
I was just going to ask you. Well, first of all, I was going to say that for those of you that don't know, Andrew McGuire is in the extension area at Washington State University.
Super smart guy.
He spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff. So I should have pointed that out at the beginning. But if we were still, let's just go back in time. If we were still hunters and gatherers, how hungry would we be at this point?
Oh, well, those of us that were still alive would probably be pretty hungry.
I wonder what the population would have topped out at.
Well, who knows? But up until 1960, what I can tell you, Shaun, is that the population grew. Food production was in sync, so it grew the same as the population. And how we did it was we farmed more land. So the population today is 2.5 times what it was in 1960. So that means we would have to be farming 2.5 more acres. And if we go back to the hunter-gatherer days, I don't think we would even ever have gotten to the point of the population growth we had up until 1960. I don't know that for sure, but it's just the natural ecosystem is not designed to have all of that nutrient removal. People don't want us to use fertilizer, but when I grow 200 bushel corn, 100 bushel wheat, 65 bushel canola, I'm removing so many nutrients from the soil. I got to put them back. If I don't put them back, it just won't sustain that production. And by the way, we saw this in a major way when we did the long-term P&K study here in Ontario. And after 10 years, the soybean production, where we had applied no fertilizer at all, where those soil tests started out low, the soybean production was so low that Horst Bonner, the soybean specialist here in the province, basically said, I will not do this anymore because there's so little production there that it means nothing. It just means nothing. Yeah. So, if we're going to take massive quantities off to feed the population of the world today, then we have to continue to put things back. And that includes, tillage at some level. As much as I'm a minimum till guy, no till guy. Yeah, we aren't going to do it in nature. Just doesn't work.
Well, one of the things that Andrew posts here is nature knows best, and crop production should function like nature are enticing ideas, but there is no evidence they work as consistent strategies. A better strategy: test everything, keep what is useful. Sounds way too practical for today's world in 2024, Pete.
Yeah. Well, I really like his final thing, right? That we are into full toolbox farming, Shaun. We are full toolbox farmers, as opposed to in the natural system. There's a whole bunch of tools that are not in the toolbox, and he points out, and it's so true. In the natural system, we put a lot more back into the soil. A lot of plants in the natural ecosystem spend a lot of time putting carbohydrates into their root systems, which man can't harvest and eat, right? Yeah. They just are not edible. And because they do that, there's nothing to harvest. Our annual grain crops don't put nearly as much carbon back into the soil because they put it all into the grain that we harvest and take off, right? And so he's 100% right. Test and take what is useful.
Well, I think you and I have ranted about this before, but this delusion that somehow farming in 1910 or 1885, somehow that was like better. It's like this romanticized delusion that some people have. And I made the trip, drove from Las Vegas, Nevada last Wednesday afternoon and made it to Bismarck, North Dakota by Thursday night. Long trip. Okay. It was a lot of looking out the window. And as I'm driving through Wyoming, which is a very large state, all I could think about is the roughness of the stagecoach as they were going over that terrain and what that would have been like and what their backs would have felt like by the end of 3 hours of that. Never mind 3 months. But if you're driving across, you think like I wish we could be like Marty McFly, get in a DeLorean and go back in time and remind ourselves it wasn't great. Like it wasn't perfect, and we are not perfect today, nor shall we be into the future. But I think we sort of forget what it was really like. And as I drive by a ranch, and it said established 1889, and you just imagine what their struggles as food producers. Never mind producing food for the local community of what was there, but just trying to make sure that they didn't starve to death in the middle of a Wyoming winter and a snowstorm and living in a sod hut and trying to keep everybody alive and prevented frostbite. Like it's not as romantic as maybe we make it out to be in the movies.
It's not romantic at all, Shaun. I mean, think about if you had a toothache back in 1880. What did they do about that toothache? Well, if you had a toothache, they pulled the tooth. Now you have a toothache. There's so many things we can do about it. And that is good. But in 1880, if they had a grasshopper infestation, they just had no crop left to eat
Yeah.
And that's better than today. We have grasshoppers. Yeah, they're tough to control, but at least we have tools in the toolbox, right? Yeah, this I don't know why the past always seems to be romanticized, and maybe it's because it's in the literature, and there were great people back then, and you think about when I grew up with mom and mom's cooking, that's a pretty fond memory for me, but I know she didn't have the tools we have today. It's just that I grew up with that, and it seemed pretty good at the time.
Hey, maximize your productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. M&P Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Visit mmp.ca to learn more. Pete, I've got a couple more questions for you. Can you hang around for a few more minutes?
Sure. Yep, absolutely, Shaun. Anything for you.
Well, we got to pay some bills. We got to play. Listen to the commercial, buy the products that you hear, and we'll be back right after this. Here's what Wheat Pete's word on RealAgriculture.com is all about in under 30 seconds.
It's wheat time. I love wheat time. I love wheat. Get that sulfur on. Get that seeding rate right. Get that nitrogen on your wheat right. Get that protein. Know your variety. Know when you need to put fungicides on. Pick your product. Pick your rate. Do the right job. Get this wheat crop right. Have a nice day. Grow amazing wheat.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
I got a little ranty in the last segment. I like it. I love a good rant, Pete. It gets you a little fired up on a Monday. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Hey, excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more by going to excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca. Okay, Pete, I wanted to ask you about crop planning. I actually really look forward to the spot in the calendar, okay? This is, call me a psycho if you want, but between like Boxing Day and New Year's, it's really slow. Email slows down. People stop. You don't get the phone calls. You don't get all the requests. It's really calm. And you kind of come to the office and you think about that. It's a great time for strategy. It's a great time to think about the business plan. And it's a great time for many of the audience to really, if you have not put in motion yet, it's time to put in motion the crop plan for 2025, because seeding and planting time is not far out. It's going to be here before we know it.
100%, Shaun. And crop plans to me are so critical. And you always have to be able to be flexible with your crop plans. But I think there's so much uncertainty out there in the marketplace, that like fertilizer prices. I think you've had Josh Linville on here, and he sort of said, man, just get ready to have your head twisted one way and then the other way and then the other way. And it's kind of because we just don't know. But at the end of the day, if you get to, well, even now in Western Canada, you get to the 15th of February and you're in Alberta, you may well be able to go to the field with ultra early seeding of cereals. And anybody who's done it,
pivot you just did there, how you transitioned to that. I see what you did there.
Oh yeah, it always comes back to something I want to talk about, Shaun. But no, realistically, if you don't have your seed in place for that, if you don't have your fertilizer in place for that, you're done. And maybe it doesn't happen the 15th of February, but even if it's the 15th of April or the 1st of May, man, that comes so fast. And logistics in terms of where is the product, where can you get the product, and making sure you have all that lined up and making sure you know what you're going to do. The worst thing to happen is you hit an early spring and you can go to the field on April the 12th versus you normally go to the field on April the 28th and you're kind of scratching your head saying, well, what the heck do I do? That's a non-starter, full out. That's a non-starter. And I get that there's a lot of uncertainty, but you still have to make those plans. And then if it gets to be the 20th of March and the canola market is in the absolute sewer and you just say, I can't grow canola this year, well, then go to plan B, but be able to go to plan B with some strategy in place.
Yeah, well, so a couple things. We were talking and why the timing right now is important. Because we looked at cost saving measures back in October. So where were farmers intending to cost save? And in the open-ended section, one of the things that's a lot of farmers mentioned was, really looking at pre-buys. And sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that's a pre-buy discount. Not worth my while. Like it's not enough of a discount relative to the cost of money and all that kind of stuff. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it really does save you some money to do the pre-buy. So at least go through that exercise, the evaluation of some of the programming out there, like whether it's on fertilizer, it's on crop protection products, it's on seed, things like that. Okay, that's one thing. And you heard we were reading the DeKalb ad earlier, just as an example of
$40 a bag.
Exactly, right? So is that enough? You determine that. It's not for me to tell you. Sounds like a lot. But there was a tweet from Kevin Blair, Blair's Ag. They're very successful ag retailer in Saskatchewan. And he tweeted on the weekend or posted on the weekend that made me ask or follow up with him. But he said, currently it looks like taking canola completely out of the rotation holds some merit for some growers in terms of the net per acre value. And what came to mind was, what is better than canola? And there's a series of them. But I don't know where canola fits on the list. Let's just say it was fifth. Okay, and I don't know. It probably depends where you are, but let's just say in the generality, let's say it's fifth. Economically, you can justify taking it out. But what if agronomically it's a key part of the rotation? And how do we balance that? Right? Like a lot of times we talk about with a crop, this fight of agronomics versus economics, where we move from like 4 crops in the rotation or 3 crops in rotation to 2 and 1. Right? Because of economics. But in this case, we're talking about maybe moving something out completely, like it's the reverse. So especially as it comes to canola, how do we do this balance?
Yeah. And so Shaun, I think it's a great question. And you just have to recognize, and it's interesting that, barley comes up because if you look at the MASC data, right? The Manitoba Ag Services data, which is sort of like their crop insurance, and they actually track rotations, and the subsequent crop grown after barley often yields less. There's something about barley. Wheat after canola works wonderfully. Wheat after barley doesn't work as well. So there's long-term ramifications. And I'm not against growing barley, but it's just interesting how those things play out. And you really do have to have a longer term look. I listened to a soybean double crop after corn out of South Carolina. One of the main things they talked about was that root knot nematodes affected both crops. And by doing that double cropping, they saw a tremendous increase in root knot nematode. So there's those things that rotation fixes that as you narrow that rotation in really become problematic. And you don't think about that in the short term.
Yeah, good points. Hey, if anybody out there has any thoughts on this, how you balance it or how you work on your crop planning and that process, always fascinated by this, very interested, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Pete, have yourself a great week.
You as well, Shaun. Thanks for having me. I'm going to get to talk about lodging to Sask wheat on Wednesday, so that'll be a ton of fun.
Nice. You're going to Saskatoon?
No, it's virtual.
Oh, it's virtual. Okay, cool. Oh, nice. Well, you have a great time with those farmers in Saskatchewan. Hey, that's Peter Wheat Pete Johnson. Of course, you can hear a new episode of Wheat Pete's Word. A new episode drops every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to talk about what's on the Agronomists tonight with Lyndsey Smith. And I'm sure we'll work in probably some conversations about what happened today in Ottawa with Minister Freeland deciding to remove herself from cabinet. She's a backbencher now. What does all this mean for the government going forward? We'll work that in as well. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Farmers, trust is everything. Let me tell you, Genesis Fertilizers is making real progress toward providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility. Okay, there's lots to chat about. We got to squeeze all this in. Joining us right now is Lyndsey Smith, editor of RealAgriculture.com. Also hosts this show on Tuesdays and is on the RealAg Issues panel on Fridays. The list is endless of things that she does, and she's here on this Monday. Lyndsey, how are we doing?
I'm doing well. I also host The Agronomists, which is what we're going to talk about first.
Oh, I thought I said that. Did I not say that? Okay.
No, Tuesday issues.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We wear many hats.
Let's start off with there's big news, and I want to get to that, but tonight, the original reason that you're here is to talk about what's on The Agronomists tonight, because I think a lot of the RealAg Radio audience in Canada and the United States, really, this is a program you need to be tuning into. So I want to give it a little bit, we want to make sure that everyone's aware of it. So it's an hour-long show, Monday nights, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain, okay?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Focus on an agronomic issue. Have experts from around Canada and the U.S., North American experts that can speak to it. It's live. People can ask questions. It's honestly, it's a lot of fun because Lyndsey makes it so. What's the topic tonight?
So tonight is pulse production. And we will get some soybeans in there too, even though technically not a pulse. That's okay. So tonight we're going to talk pulse production. We're going to talk about root rots. We're going to talk about Aphanomyces, of course. But we're also going to talk about rotation and about the benefits of putting pulses in rotation, but some of the caveats to doing that. Certainly we've got some herbicide issues sometimes we have to think about, but sometimes some good things to think about as far as fertility, etc. So last week, we had a great show as well. Next week, this is a good one here, everybody. Next week will be our season wrap up, our end of year wrap up. And so we're going to have Wheat Pete, Peter Johnson, and Ray Debunking to go through. Now, Ray.
How are you going to get words in?
I don't plan to. I actually plan to have hot cocoa and just watch the sparks fly.
Yeah, let her ride, boys. Let her ride.
Yeah, exactly. So Pete, of course, is on the show quite a bit. He also watches quite a bit, throws some questions in now and again. And Ray is retired, worked obviously in the fertilizer industry his whole career. But Ray, I really appreciate him. He joins us pretty much live every Monday night and is a wealth of information for the background on things. And that's one thing I love about this show. So yes, it goes on YouTube after we're done. It goes on realagriculture.com/agronomist. You can see all the past episodes. But if you join us live, this is the coolest part, is that it is live. You get to ask those questions, and all of the people that are in the chat often have side conversations, side discussions, get to ask questions of those experts as well. So we have plenty of researchers, extension people, agronomists, farmers themselves, all join us in the chat live. And that's one of my favorite things about the Monday night show, is that we get just fantastic discussions. And sometimes the guests have questions, and sometimes it's the people in the chat that answer them. So it's a really phenomenal bringing together of amazing brains and thoughts and experience, and we get to share about a topic of the week. So I do want to say for January, we're going to talk precision tillage. We're going to talk about some soil dynamics. We're going to talk about phosphorus. We have a different topic every week, 2 or 3 experts every week from somewhere, usually North America based, although we have had some Australians and even further away. And it's a lot of fun, and we learn. And that's the That's the best part of it all.
Okay, so with pulses tonight on Monday, December 16th. My brother's birthday, by the way. Happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Okay, so we've got pulse productions. We got chickpeas, lentils, field peas, faba beans. That's the list goes on and on. So whether you're in Western Canadian prairies, maybe you've got some peas in Eastern Canada, which some people do.
Yeah.
If you're, I've been to the Northern Pulse Grower meeting in Minot, North Dakota. So I know they're growing it in Montana and North Dakota, South Dakota. So anywhere there's pulse crops, this is going to be informative and interesting for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I find really great is that sometimes we do things that are just about corn. Okay, so that means that there's a portion of the audience it's maybe not super applicable to. But at the same time, the way things are sort of set up, it's interesting for everybody. So I really appreciate everybody who comes out, regardless sort of what the topic is. But there are definitely certain topics that really get everybody out. Tillage is one of them. Compaction is another one. Anything to do with soil, anything to do with corn and nitrogen. Look out. We get so many people on, but it's always a good time and there's always something to learn. So check it out tonight.
Yep.
8 p.m.
And there's also CCA-CU credits available as well.
That is correct.
And like Lyndsey said, you can listen live or watch live. We also podcast it, so wherever you get your podcasts, okay? And it also goes up on YouTube later on. So there's lots of opportunities for you to consume it. You don't have to be there live. It's great live because you get to participate in the chat, which is always a lot of fun. I sort of use that time to make fun of Pete. Personally,
as do I.
So there is it's always fun because he was just on the show, so he's off now.
Yeah, exactly. He makes fun of me too, so it's fine.
What before we leave here, what do we make of what is going on in Ottawa today? This is, my dad had some sayings. I cannot use them here on Rural Radio. If we were on Stern 100, Howard 100, we could, but here on Rural Radio, we got to be a little bit more respectful of language.
We do.
This is a cluster, what? What is going on?
It's a train wreck wrapped in a landslide during an earthquake. Okay, so I don't know how much people...
With a tsunami going on.
Okay, so is this... I'm going to put this out there. Is this finally the beginning of the end of the Trudeau government? Because certainly, depending on who you talk to right now, Chrystia Freeland handing in her resignation from cabinet. Now, she's going to stay on as an MP. She's a Toronto MP. She's going to stay on as an MP. She is going to run in the next election, but she has told Justin Trudeau she quit. She is no longer in cabinet. She is no longer deputy prime minister. She is no longer minister of finance. And this was the day she was supposed to deliver the fall economic statement. But no, she submitted that letter today to the prime minister. Now, there's a lot of things we don't know, but we are certainly hearing from many that, NDP leader Singh has already come out and said, this is a government that's not got Canada's best interest in mind, which is basically what Freeland put in her letter, that essentially we need to be putting Canadians first, and perhaps she felt that the economic measures that she was supposed to be putting in this fall economic statement were out of line on that. We've also heard from Liberal MPs. So Francis Drouin has basically said flat out that Trudeau should go. And we're getting, as of recording, we haven't heard from Poilievre yet, but we know he will be making a statement here shortly. So there is speculation, of course, that we could have had a cabinet shuffle as early as Wednesday. All of that is now, perhaps it's right now. The fall economic statement may still go out, but it may not get read in the House. So that
may not have enough MPs to fill the cap. This is sort of like, it's bowl season in college football. This is sort of like where you have lots of transfers. You don't even have enough roster to play the game. That's sort of what the government's facing here.
Well, yes, because we also heard, so Sean Fraser is also out. That news came yesterday, just ahead of Freeland's resignation. So
family, personal issues.
Yeah, exactly. But the rats are scurrying. Let's put it that way, right? Like the ship is going down and everybody who can take an escape hatch is taking one. So, but this is a tough one.
Singh says that. Okay.
Yes, it's pretty rich. I know.
If you believe that, then participate in the non-confidence vote.
Then take down the government.
You actually hold the cards here. You're the one with the golden ticket, like Willy Wonka gave out. You're the one that could make action happen.
Yeah.
But,
so maybe, except for that by forcing an election, so by pulling the confidence of this government, should the NDP choose to side with the Conservatives and do such a thing, honestly, who wins? The Conservatives win, right? The NDP aren't in a super great position. But at the same time, I don't know how you think you have any credibility left as a standalone party if all you do is say that this government is done and then never pull the plug.
All of this about Mark Carney? Like, Carney, right. Like, if you're Carney, you're the head of the Bank of Canada, you were the head of the Bank of England, you were like, run, dude, run.
Yeah, well, and that is some of the speculation today is who do they name as finance minister? Who's going to want that job right now? No one.
Somebody.
So,
this will. What do they call it? This will smoke out somebody that's actually power hungry.
We're going to smoke them
whoever
out.
takes in a government that's rumored to provide a $62 billion deficit.
Mm-hmm.
When they said it was going to be 40.
Yeah.
If whoever steps up, that's the person you know. Like that's power hungry.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway.
So anyway, and I mean, some have speculated that this is Freeland's way of signaling that she may be in a leadership race, maybe, in that she's saying she's leaving cabinet, but she's going to run again and she's going to stay as an MP. Perhaps we will see, even though we did see, a lot of Liberal MPs that, signed that letter that said you have to do something different. Perhaps we'll see some of that. But I think ultimately this shows how incredibly expired this government is. And just let's go to an election. Let's start again. We've got a lot of work to do in 2025. So let's get at it.
Yeah, especially with some of the the trade issues that are going on, and
exactly.
Obviously we got domestic things we got to work out as well.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah.
I asked the audience at the beginning of the show. I'll ask you to finish up here.
Okay.
What was a bigger sort of like? Yeah, I'll show you who holds the cards. Was it Trudeau telling Freeland that she was going to take a different cabinet position, no longer be finance minister on the Friday before the fall economic statement, or Freeland quitting the morning of the fall economic statement? Which was the bigger sort of like, I'll show you move?
So I think Freeland wins on this one as far as like, oh yeah. And I would like to point out that on Friday's issues panel, I believe I said that I would take her out for a coffee or a beverage if she stood up and said she wasn't going to do this. So technically, Miss Freeland, if you're listening, I owe you a beer. I think it is the bigger move. At the same time, I want to back up a step, which is the more disrespectful move. I think that if Trudeau didn't anticipate that she would be quite ticked and not deal with this very well, as in all that she's been through with him, and then she basically gets a demotion 2 days before she's supposed to deliver this. You have to be, now, again, I know you're sitting down, so just, he's not very self-aware. How else did you think she was going to take it? It's like when somebody okay, now don't take this the wrong way, but of course they're going to take it the wrong way. So realistically, I think he's either clueless or I don't know how she would have taken it any differently. So yeah, I honestly don't know that she had any other move if she wanted to continue a political career in any capacity.
As I said on RFD TV this morning, America, you don't own all the political drama.
We have some.
Yeah. We've got our own. Hey, Lyndsey, have yourself a great day, and we'll talk to you throughout the week.
Yeah, you as well. Talk to everybody tomorrow.
Hey, everybody. Agronomists tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain. Lyndsey does a fantastic job with that show. You need to tune in. You need to check it out. It is like a weekly live, entertaining, educational agronomy show that and Lyndsey just does a great job with it. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Cheers.